bracket. So let's get into game number 1 between Ruben Gianzini and Kazuki Kobayashi. And as we see these leads, Kazuki does have the Ice Rider, Calyrex, and Incineroar. And for Ruben, that Zamazenta is out on the field right away next to Incineroar, or Rillaboom.
Fake out plus restricted Pokemon from both trainers. Of course, Rillaboom being faster than Incineroar in almost every case. You do have the advantage of the faster fake out. You get to decide which of the Incineroar or the Calyrex Ice Rider you want to fake out and ensure that they don't get to act on this turn. Of course, there's always the option to just trade those fake outs. A lot of times, if you're the slower fake out player, you're going to opt into that just to make sure you don't kind of get caught.
I think it's a good idea to try to invest the fake out, but I'm also kind of wondering how you decide to maybe spread out some of this damage as well. Would it be a little bit better to maybe switch something out here? I guess if you really want to, you can also keep the Rillaboom in. There's kind of a couple of different ways I see this turn playing out, but we'll see this terrestrialization first.
It's going to be cool to see which of this terrestrializations are invested immediately. It's going to be that Incineroar, hedging your bets against a combination of Fake Out and Body Press directly into that slot at the beginning of the game. You're ensuring that Incineroar cannot be knocked out on this turn. You get to keep it around.
And you have things like that Flare Blitz as well as that Knockoff, which are going to be such great utility to have later on. As the Rillaboom is going to get out of there with the U-turn into the Calyrex Ice, now have an opportunity to bring out something that can actually respond to this Bug Terra. There aren't really a whole lot of fantastic options against that as we get a chance to peek at what Ruben brought to this first game, but it's still really nice to know you got the terrestrialization out of the way and now you can think ahead, what can you use your Terra for?
You can respond to the Bug Terra, but you also have to worry about a possible incoming Glacial Lance. We haven't seen the Calyrex attack just yet, and a lot of trainers, again, do opt to go straight for that Glacial Lance, get some damage down, especially considering Rillaboom was the Pokemon there. Would have been a very tempting option for Kazuki.
It's just going to be the Shadow Rider Calyrex. Ruben kind of hedging those bets, saying if I have to take Glacial Lance, maybe it'll be a little bit better that I do have this Focus Sash. As we see the U-turn from the Incineroar, it's so funny to see the Bug Terra because you actually do get a little bit of a boost to your U-turn damage since that's a bug type attack. But more critically, you're breaking the Focus Sash on the Shadow Rider Calyrex. So if it is a Glacial Lance that goes towards that Zamazenta and Shadow Rider, that Shadow Rider doesn't have that Focus Sash to protect it anymore.
What a really interesting turn there. I think the U-turn on the Rillaboom makes a lot of sense. You don't really want to be taking that Glacial Lance, but at the same time, neither of your two Pokemon want to either, and Glacial Lance comes through.
Glacial Lance into the Zamazenta and the Calyrex. It's a knockout onto that Calyrex as it switches into the Rillaboom's place. And so one big restricted now Ruben doesn't have access to for the rest of this game.
This is why I love when trainers just go straight for those Glacial Lances on that first turn. Yeah, of course, Calyrex Ice Rider being one of the slowest restricted Pokemon we have access to, it's always so tempting to set that Trick Room up, but knowing that Ruben has access to that Amoonguss, knowing that you want to be able to start getting some damage out onto the field as quickly as possible, the immediate Glacial Lance is a great decision there, especially considering the things that could have taken that Glacial Lance. We had the Rillaboom, we had the Amoonguss, we had the Calyrex with this Focus Sash broken. That's 3 Pokemon that really don't want to be taking all that damage on the first turn of the game.
And it's so hard if you're Ruben to kind of lock into a Wide Guard or something with Zamazenta on the first turn, because you know you've got to get something done with the Pokemon, and it's also very possible you could just get faked out by that Incineroar. So it's just a really tough call to make.
Instead of a 2 fake out turn there, we had a 0 fake out turn, which I think paid off a lot better for Kazuki, especially that Terra Bug resisting the Body Press means that Incineroar can re-enter the field at some point and get that Intimidate back off. Most importantly into the Rillaboom, but of course you are lowering Heavy Slam damage from Zamazenta, and I think especially important for threatening a Flare Blitz into that Amoonguss too.
Just to protect here from the Landorus as you start to suss out a little bit what this Rillaboom is going to do. Since it's freshly switched in, it does have access to use Fake Out to block one of these Pokemon on Kazuki's side from attacking on this turn, but the Protect is going to work double fold as we just see a double attack come out here from the Zamazenta and Rillaboom, so the Protects are great here.
Landorus now threatens super effective damage into both of these Pokemon with a ground type attack into the Zamazenta or a Sludge Bomb into that Rillaboom. I do believe it's also, well, it is Terra Poison, but cannot Terra because Incineroar already has. Ruben does have access to his own Terrestrialization, though. The Zamazenta might want to become a Water type to make sure it doesn't get, kind of wiped off them by that Earth power.
But that's going to be a problem because if the Zamazenta Terra is here, we don't know what this fourth Pokemon is for Kazuki in the back. It's very hard to believe it's not the the Miraidon back there, but that was a big critical hit into the Landorus, and there's no Terra. Zamazenta just goes down in a one-hit knockout. And so Ruben is going to be down to his final two Pokemon in this first game. Rillaboom's going to try to even up the score, and the Woodhammer is good for that. So now Landorus does get knocked out, but not before taking that Zamazenta down with it. What a big trade to take, and Kazuki still gets a chance to use the Glacial hits on this Ice Rider Calyrex. Single target, that is plenty enough to knock out this Rillaboom. So one more Pokemon here for Ruben, and what's in the back, I think he's gonna have a really hard time dealing with what Kazuki has left.
It was already a very favorable trade when you're getting rid of the Zamazenta and losing your own Landorus. When you add on top of that, you also get the clean KO on that Rillaboom. This is a very, very strong start for Kazuki here. Unfortunately for Ruben, I don't know that the Sludge Bomb will be enough to save him in this 1v3 scenario. And Kazuki immediately going hard on the offense. That U-turn Glacial Lance combination, especially with that Terra Bug, surely the Terra Bug damage increase might have been the difference maker in knocking out that Calyrex in the first turn. And at that point, it was just really hard for Ruben to come back. I love that you called out like the water terrestrialization being an option on Zamazenta, but maybe there's something in the back like that Miraidon that could easily just come in and electro drift it to oblivion. So it was a really, really difficult spot for Ruben to be in defensively at that point.
And it's also possible it wasn't the Miraidon, but yeah, how do you feel comfortable making that prediction?
Right.
And as we get a chance to look back through some of these replays, it's so interesting to see how this first turn played out. Right away, I felt like Kazuki was just off to such a great start, being able to grab those KOs so easily onto that Shadow Rider and the Zamazenta. When both of your restricted Pokemon are down for the count like that, it is really hard to come back. We've seen it before, but it is tough.
You have to wonder, Amoonguss and Rillaboom are both very, very strong Pokemon. Both good within the metagame, like as a whole, just individual Pokemon all have a lot of strengths to them. But into a team like this one with Calyrex, Ice Rider, and Miraidon, two Pokemon that are very good against grass types, you have to wonder if they're great brings, right? Maybe one of them, especially the Rillaboom, you kind of want to have around just to threaten Miraidon, turn off that electric terrain, turn off that Hadron engine boost. But I wonder if Amoonguss is the right play here.
I think you're right about that. I think Amoonguss struggles in this matchup a lot unless you're able to kind of put it in a position where you're able to put something to sleep with the threat of the electric terrain from the Miraidon being able to shut off that potential, as well as just having a lot of options to deal super effective damage to it, I think makes that Amoonguss a very difficult bring, especially if it's going to be in the back and you can't have that defensive switch. As we head into game number 2, Kazuki Kobayashi was able to win the first one, so one more game, and he is able to not only secure a spot in the top 4 of NAIC, but also a shot at the World Championships. And so it comes down to this, Incineroar and Calyrex Ice Rider for Kazuki, and we see both restricted for Ruben out on the field.
No fake out threat from Ruben off the bat. In this case, Kazuki has the Incineroar, which is able to only flinch the Zamazenta. In this case, Calyrex being immune thanks to that ghost typing. You have to wonder, if you're going to go for fake out again, it's got to be that Zamazenta. You're letting that Calyrex attack, possibly even go for something like an Encore if you want to maybe try and catch that Incineroar sleeping. But at the same time, you have a little bit of safer plays, right? You maybe not want to go for that much of a raid right off the bat, and you have this option to go for this Terra Ghost Astral Barrage, which we see Ruben hovering. That would guarantee a lot of damage, possibly a 2-hit KO into this Calyrex Ice Rider if it does opt to go for the Terrestrialization, and if not, you're throwing a 1-hit KO off the bat.
Yeah, but when you're in a situation that's as intense as this, you've got those two options, go for the gas or try to play it a little bit safe. And so I like that Ruben is going to split the difference here. You have the opportunity to get some really big damage off with this Shadow Rider Calyrex, especially now that you've invested the Ghost Terrestrialization on top. But you know that this Zamazenta could either play that supportive role with the Wide Guard, like you said, to deal with the Glacial Lances, or just go for some of that outright damage. But as we see Kazuki also match this Terrestrialization, it's going to be that Water Terra on that Calyrex. So a great way to just kind of have a defensive type here, at least versus the Astral Barrage. Incineroar goes for the fake out, so Zamazenta is not able to move on this turn, but the Calyrex still can.
Astral Barrage will come through, boosted 50% by that Terrestrialization. Will do heavy damage to this Calyrex Ice Rider, but still not enough for a 2-hit KO, even with the Terra Ghost. Trick Room will get set up, so these speeds will be flipped for the next 4 turns after this one. And now this Incineroar and Calyrex Ice Rider are going to be the fastest things on the field. On top of that Leftovers recovery, this Calyrex Shadow Rider didn't get too much done on that turn. I think he wanted a little bit more damage out of it to make that Terrestrialization worth it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the fact that it's the 3-hit KO now from the Astral Barrage, I think makes it really tough. Now that the Trick Room is set up, this poor Shadow Rider Calyrex still has that Focus Sash intact, but based on the damage that we saw, it's still probably under threat of getting knocked out to a double up from the Incineroar as well as the Ice Rider. I mean, the Incineroar now, being one of the slower things on the field, can just go for knockoff into that Calyrex, and what in the back actually wants to take that? You don't want to lose your item here.
Nothing really wants to lose an item, but the saving grace, I think, for Ruben is that Wide Guard will block the only damaging move that Kazuki's Calyrex Ice Rider has. Of course, you could try and maybe like knock off plus Leech Seed and hope that's enough for a KO there, but if the Calyrex Ice Rider wants to do big damage, it's got to be Glacial Lance. Leech Seed instead, though.
And it's a great call. Since the Shadow Rider Calyrex protected, there was only one good target for this. And it's going to be the U-turn onto the Zamazenta as well. Kazuki making a fantastic read there to double into the Zamazenta instead to ensure that not only do you get this Leech Seed set up, but you also get that pivot out with the Incineroar.
Bit disastrous for Ruben here. Of course, protecting that Calyrex, not wanting to take a double up of attacks, but instead Kazuki double targets that Zamazenta. Body press comes through, and thanks to the resistant typing in that flying typing of Landorus, does very little damage. We're still in a position where Kazuki has the speed advantage. The Zamazenta and Landorus, based on how they're trained, we may have seen the interaction in game 1, but I'm not recalling. This Landorus could be attacking before Zamazenta still, but even if it's not, Heavy Slam, probably not going to KO from here. This Landorus will have the chance to fire off really scary Earth Power, which we saw just clearly when it KO'd the Zamazenta earlier on.
And the Turret Terror is already invested, so there is no way to actively stop that outside of going for the Protect on the Zamazenta. But is that telegraphed? Is that something that Kazuki is going to play around, knowing that this is kind of your biggest shot? Zamazenta is now going to show off one of the reasons why it is one of the best Pokemon to pair next to that Shadow Rider Calyrex, and that is the Wide Guard. It's going to protect you from the Glacial Lances, so Kazuki's Calyrex Ice is not going to be able to lock down any damage, but this Landorus still has an option to go for single target. So it could be the Sandseer, which would get blocked, but it is just going to be that Earth Power. Calyrex does hang on through that, so we can fire off the big Astral Barrage. Nothing to boost this up, though, so this Calyrex Ice should stick around, bar a critical hit.
Really, really smart targeting with the Earth Power there from Kazuki. If the Glacial Lance comes through, if the Wide Guard comes through as you're selecting that Glacial Lance, and you go for the Earth Power into Zamazenta, sure, you're getting the knockout on Zamazenta there, but it is already Leech Seeded, it's not doing a ton of damage, and more importantly, you're not breaking that Focus Sash on the Calyrex Shadow Rider. Earth Power, the single target attack, cannot be blocked by that Wide Guard, does get damage down. Really, a lot of damage, really. I think any amount of damage would have been enough, though, because all you really wanted that turn was to break that Focus Sash, ensure Calyrex Shadow Rider can be knocked out by one further attack. And based on what else Kazuki has in the back, it could either be this Incineroar coming in to threaten a knockoff, or even something else that can just finish off the Calyrex.
I actually think that Kazuki is not super happy about the targeting there. The Zamazenta was free. Since it didn't go for Protect, it would have been knocked out to that Earth Power. And it's the Farigiraf in the back. I now kind of wonder, how are you going to be able to get through this Zamazenta? There's no Miraidon. You can't even get this Electric Seed set up for this Farigiraf, which would be pretty beneficial versus any of those physical attackers Ruben has potentially brought in the back. But where's the damage now for this Zamazenta?
I think you're just playing a war of attrition here with the Zamazenta. The Leech Seed is still coming through. You do have a Psychic on Farigiraf that can do a little bit of damage to that Zamazenta, hit it on its weaker special defense side. And if at any time the Zamazenta doesn't go for Wide Guard, it's going to take a little bit of damage from that Glacial Lance too.
There's still a couple turns of Trick Room left, and it is going to be there is a world where Ruben does stall out these turns of Trick Room and then can bring the Shadow Rider back in. But now you have to play this board positioning game where this Farigiraf is going to be immune. You don't really want to consistently go for something like the Wide Guard, because then you're not doing any damage with this Zamazenta. If you want to make this board attrition work, and the Ice Rider Calyrex gets knocked out. Ruben had a great turn there, immune to the Psychic with his Champi switching in, and you get the knockout onto the other big threat. Kazuki only has this Incineroar and Farigiraf left, and that's going to be a lot.
Really important turn for Ruben there. Kazuki maybe not expecting that Champi. to be a Pokemon that Ruben even brought to this battle. It would have been really useful, but it's something that he was able to swap in on that Psychic. The Psychic there going into the Calyrex Shadow slot in case of another Wide Guard, but knowing that that probably was the case, that's a really nice swap to the Chien-Pao. Is able to resist that Glacial Lance, and now that the Calyrex Ice Rider has been knocked out, Kazuki's down to his final 2 Pokemon, just gonna be this Incineroar and Farigiraf. The Calyrex Shadow Rider still, I mean, swapping out, it's always nice to kind of preserve your options. Not going to be doing too much damage for the remainder of this game, even if there was no forfeit coming through there. But I think just a really, really strong play to make there. The combination of the Sword of Ruin probably allowing for that body press to KO the Calyrex Ice Rider means that Ruben has evened up the score.
Now we get to go to a game 3.
We love game 3s.
We do love game 3s. As a reminder, Ruben needs to win this match to allow one of the other European players to make it through that top 75 Worlds qualification for the championship point leaderboard. And Kazuki wants to win this game to go to the World Championships through a direct invite. Let's look back on some of the moments from this game number 2, because we could already see right away how this game played out differently, with Kazuki wanting to lean into the Trick Room strategy from the front.
The Trick Room right off the bat did allow for the speed advantage going forward, but the way that the turns played out after that, I'm not sure the speeds mattered a whole lot. There weren't too many KOs being taken in the next couple turns, and especially, you know, if you're setting up Trick Room and then the next turn you're using Leech Seed, I'm not sure that's kind of the best use of your time there. You really want to be maximizing the damage you can output during this Trick Room. And thinking backwards, I think you might have been right. The Earth Power into Zamazenta may have been a lot more valuable. You do eliminate that possibility of Wide Guards, so you can freely Glacial Lance on further turns, and you're kind of getting rid of that only thing that is going to be heavily resisting that Glacial Lance damage.
Yeah, it feels like such a missed opportunity there, because I think Kazuki wins the game if you just target down that Zamazenta. It's still a little difficult because you do have that Chien-Pao that can threaten things like the Sucker Punch, but that's why you saw Kazuki thinking ahead.
Right.
I bring the Farigiraf here, so I shut off your ability to go for those priority attacks, and then you have to deal with things like Ice Spinner, which that Water Calyrex Ice would have resisted. The Landorus is a little vulnerable, but hopefully the Landorus has done enough at that point by getting rid of the Zamazenta that you feel much better about going into the rest of that game. So here we are, game number 3. Both of our trainers 1 win away from making it into the top 4 with a lot of Worlds qualification stakes on the line. And Kazuki is going to bring out the Miraidon next to the Urshifu. Big adjustment here as Ruben sticks to that game 2 game plan of both restricteds on the field at the same time.
Big mix-up here from Kazuki, 2 Pokemon we haven't seen from him in either of the first 2 games. Really catching Ruben off guard here. I think this is a wonderful spot to be in if you're Kazuki, because you do have the terrain control for now. You know, Ruben most likely... Oh, do we even see there's no Rillaboom?
Ooh.
So the Miraidon has hit the field, and there's no Rillaboom in the back to shut off that electric terrain. Really, really great spot to be in for Kazuki. Of course, you have to worry about the Amoonguss. It has that Rocky Helmet, so if you're swapping the Amoonguss into a Surging Strikes from Urshifu, it's going to lose about half of its HP just from using its own attack, which might be something you worry about here, but you're all threatening 2 very big KOs.
And this is where this Choice Scarf from the Urshifu really comes in handy. Shadow Rider Calyrex is normally considered one of the faster Pokemon in the format, but when you put a Choice Scarf onto something like the Urshifu or for the Chi-Yu, you're always going to be outspeeding more often than not. So you can see the U-turn into the Calyrex is able to break that Focus Sash, and hopefully this Miraidon is going to be able to follow that up with a big attack. It's going to have to wait a little bit, though, as Kazuki has to figure out what Pokemon to bring into that Urshifu slot, and also needs to take an attack from this Shadow Rider Calyrex. But this time around, the Farigiraf, with the Electric Seed and the Electric Terrain active, does get a nice defense boost. And Astral Barrage, of course, is going to be immune versus that Pokemon.
It will hit this Miraidon, though. If this knocks it out in 1 hit, that's a big swing for Ruben. But this Miraidon's a huge, important piece for Kazuki, and it does survive to fire off a Volt Switch.
The Volt Switch is good on the Electric Terrain. It's just going to get the knockout onto the Shadow Rider Calyrex. So 1 restricted out of the way. The Terastallization has been spent as well. And Kazuki can bring this Urshifu back out on the field, too, if you want.
This Farigiraf is going to be a really big piece of the puzzle here for Kazuki in this game, especially knowing that there is no Rillaboom. This Farigiraf, well, I guess it kind of was already, right? You had a free swap into that Terra Ghost Astral Barrage. You do have the Electric Seed active as well, so you've got that +1 defense. You might be able to take something like a Body Press from this Zamazenta, which hasn't even gotten the chance to attack yet on this first turn. You have to imagine it's a Body Press coming in somewhere, but is it going to be that Farigiraf or whatever swaps in here?
Looks like it's going to be the Urshifu coming back out, and so body press into that spot lot. It's still able to sit there and withstand it, but you have to now think about the next couple of turns ahead. As we can see from Ruben's position, you can bring out this Amoonguss, but the problem with this is that you can't Spore. Amoonguss really is going to be here to get redirection support, and with the Terra spent, there's no way for you to actually Terastallize away from something like Psychic on the Farigiraf.
Of course, this Farigiraf with the defense boost is going to be really nice into the Chien-Pao as well. The Chien-Pao is running Sucker Punch, Ice Spinner, and Taunt, so there's no Dark-type damage that can ever actually hit this Farigiraf because Armor Tail will always be blocking those Sucker Punches. That defense boost is going to come in really handy because I think it's going to be the main way Kazuki has to get some consistent damage down to this Amoonguss in the form of Psychic.
And I wonder if you also kind of just leave this Zamazenta alone. If you know that you have the speed advantage with something like the Landorus, then maybe that's something that you're able to utilize later. But we're about to find out what Kazuki might have brought in the back to help support these other 3 Pokemon, or you just think maybe this Miraidon can come back out here and just get ready for this next turn. So Kazuki's really taking his time to make sure he gets this right, and it is the Miraidon.
Might be tough though if a body press is headed into that slot. Miraidon goes down as it does. So we're now at a 3-3 Pokemon count. Both trainers have lost one of their restricted Pokemon and only have 1 remaining. Psychic does come through into this Amoonguss though. Since it is super effective, that does a big chunk of damage. That is, a Spore comes through too.
Huh.
Yeah.
oh, because Landorus isn't affected by that.
Oh,
if the Spore actually hit the Landorus, then you would have been able to put that to sleep, and that's really the big Pokemon that's going to be standing in this Zamazenta's way. As we saw Kazuki bring that Landorus to great success in that first game, and it didn't quite get the job it needed to done in that second one, so that's why we're here in this game number 3. It is that Landorus as that 4th and final, so Kazuki knows this is going to be the thing that's able to grab him the victory, but it's tough. How do you actually get through this if you're Ruben? You can Rage Powder, which is going to help, but do you have to then bank on Sansear missing?
I think Sansear Storm is a really, really scary threat right now. Of course, you can always Wide Guard to block Sansear Storm and guarantee that Zamazenta won't get KO'd, but this Amoonguss will be knocked out by Psychic either way. So if you go for that Sansear Storm, a Wide Guard doesn't really do a whole lot because presumably you're also going for that Psychic. You
could also just protect the Landorus on this turn, get the Farigiraf to use the Psychic into the Amoonguss, just kind of hope it doesn't protect, and then the Amoonguss with the Rage Powder is out of the way. Then you can really fire off those big Earth Powers that you know is going to be that game-winning move. But we don't actually see that protect. It's just going to be the body press from the Zamazenta. And we know how well this Landorus is able to resist that. Unfortunately, this redirect is going to cause this Earth Power to go into the Amoonguss instead. But can the Farigiraf help make sure that the Zamazenta is a little bit easier to get out of the way? We see the Psychic, and it is going to do a good amount of damage there, at least just to make it easier for this Landorus to finish it off.
That Amoonguss going down is really, really big for the Urshifu in the back for Kazuki. It's going to be really hard to lock into something like the Surging Strikes, which you're probably going to want to be closing this game out with, especially into that Zamazenta with the defense boost. But if Amoonguss is on the field, a Rage Powder will essentially knock you out at this point because it did take that body press earlier on. Now you have the freedom to bring Urshifu back in at some point, go for those attacks, even to close combat actually, since there's no Terastallization available, might knock out both of these Pokemon on the field without having to fear the Amoonguss redirecting you, kind of ruining your day and letting its partner take a swing at that Urshifu.
It's so tough though, because you kind of do want your Farigiraf to go, and Champi actually just goes for the taunt here. So what that's going to shut off is things like Trick Room and Helping Hand, but you can still go for the Psychic and the Foul Play, and the body press is enough to actually knock out this Landorus thanks to that Sword of Ruin, and that's a really big deal here. Psychic is going to whittle away a little bit, but now you really have to bank on this Urshifu being able to get through 2 Pokemon.
It's a really smart turn for both of these trainers here. The Urshifu now comes in thanks to the Armor Tail ability of the Farigiraf. Sucker Punch from Chien-Pao will not be able to even have a chance to knock it out before this Urshifu can attack. And I think a close combat into that Chien-Pao is a really safe move here that kind of removes one of the 2 threats that Ruben has left. And at that point, the Zamazenta doesn't have a spread attack. You might be able to finish it off with a close combat or psychic on the following turn.
There's also a terrestrialization still here for Kazuki to use to get him over the finish line, and so it is going to be this Urshifu getting that Terra Water. It will help out versus something like an Ice Spinner, but it's also really just there to boost up any of these Surging Strikes. That's going to be what he locks into as the Surging Strikes get sent into the Qianpao. Looks like it's going to be good enough to get the knockout onto the Qianpao and leave this Zamazenta all on its own. And I think Ruben can see it. Kazuki is one Pokemon KO away from moving on to the top 4 and going to the World Championships. What a story for him. If this is how he gets there, body press into the Urshifu is going to make this a 1v1, but it comes down to the Zamazenta versus the Farigiraf.
I think it's going to be enough for Kazuki here. Even if this single Psychic doesn't KO, he's got one more next turn. But it comes through Zamazenta. Will it survive? Yes, only 17 HP. 17
HP in a dream, but I think it's going to be tough. We see the body press from this Zamazenta do just about 40%, so the Psychic in response, Kazuki Kobayashi wins, goes on to top 4, and is going to go to the World Championships.
What an incredible story, Kazuki. This was his final chance to qualify for the 2025 World Championships. Give him a shot to get back to that final tournament of the season where he's had so much success in the past. And he needed to make top 4 here in New Orleans, and he did it. He is going to go to Anaheim and compete with the best of the best in August.
Wow, I mean, this is what dreams are made of here at the North America International Championships, and for these direct invites, congratulations to Kazuki. I know this was something that he was working so hard for throughout this tournament, and it's gotta feel so good to be able to get there.